Hi guys, it's Kirsty. Today I'm going to be talking about one of the books on the reading list, which is called Self-Help for Your Nerves by Dr. Claire Weekes. But before that, I'd just like to ask, please do subscribe by clicking on the button below if you want to be notified of new videos as they're released. Okay, so moving on to the book. So previously I've talked about the two Albert Ellis books that are on the reading list, and these help us to look at changing our irrational beliefs and to work toward unconditional life, self and other acceptance, which is really important for OCD. Now this book is quite an informative book, written in quite a compassionate way. If you were to look for Claire Weekes on YouTube and hear her speaking, you'll probably find that she speaks, while Albert Ellis speaks in quite a matter-of-fact and quite comical way, Claire speaks in a kind of comforting and extremely compassionate way, kind of almost a reassuring way, but not in a seeking reassurance kind of way. So just to show you the cover, so I actually don't have this book on paper, I have it on my Kindle, so I will show you a copy of the cover on my iPad right here. So Claire was born in the early 1900s. And I believe she's Australian. She worked as a GP, and she released this book, Self-Help for Your Nerves, in 1962. And the fact that this book is still recommended for anxiety sufferers now in 2020, I think is really testament to how simple and easy to follow it is, how informative it is, and how effective it can be. So firstly, what I will say is that the way in which Claire refers to anxiety in the book is referring to it as a nervous illness. And it's basically talking you through the symptoms of the nervous illness, which we now refer to as anxiety. Obviously, do bear in mind, please, that Claire was those language like nervous illness and things, when terms like nervous breakdown, and words like that were used more kind of in the mid sort of, in 1950s, 60s, even 70s. These terms were used more so than they are now, perhaps because people tend to be given more specific diagnosis. But when she refers to nervous breakdown, nervous illness, she's referring to conditions that involve having a heightened nervous system, which is anxiety. So whether that's panic disorder, general anxiety, OCD, agoraphobia, various other phobias, PTSD, and it refers to the recovery from your very worst period that you've suffered from with those. So the book is, rather than kind of being a workbook, it's an informative and educational book. So it's quite a good one to read early on in your recovery, because it gives quite a detailed description of the many symptoms of a nervous illness, as we refer to anxiety or perhaps OCD. So talking through the physical symptoms, like describing them in detail. Basically, she wants to do this so you know that these are all symptoms of the heightened nervous system, of the anxiety, rather than anything else that you need to be panicking about and adding further anxiety on top of. So it might be, she talks through headaches, muscular pain, closing of your throat, the lead belly kind of feeling, excessive going to the toilet, number ones and number twos. It would be the blobs you might see in front of your eyes, the tingling in your fingers and your toes, acid reflux, many symptoms. So she'll talk through these in detail, so it's quite can be good, even if you think that you have a good sort of understanding of anxiety symptoms. There'll be stuff in there that you might have been suffering from that you didn't realize were, again, just more symptoms of anxiety. And what she talks about is learning to kind of observe these symptoms. It's almost kind of ahead of its time in some ways. Obviously, mindfulness, or the acceptance of mindfulness principles have been around for thousands of years, but in terms of mindfulness has really only been kind of become a more mainstream in recent years, but it almost talks through it from a mindfulness approach, kind of, you know, talking through these symptoms, giving you the details, what you know, where they're coming from and what they are, and encouraging you to kind of observe them rather than be fearful of them. So she's basically kind of walking you through how to reduce the fear of fear by educating you. So the way in which the book is laid out, so firstly, the book begins with a chapter titled The Power Within You, which talks about the fact that, you know, you can recover from the nervous illness, or as we call it, anxiety, and you can get back to being yourself again. She then has another chapter then talking about how our nervous system works and what is a nervous illness. So she talks about, that's where she'll talk about the symptoms, you know, the physical symptoms. And she goes on to further chapters about being yourself again, and then how to cure nervous illness complicated by a problem, sorrow, guilt or disgrace. So essentially talking through the other unpleasant emotions that become attached to the anxiety symptoms, which are caused by our highly sensitized nervous systems. And this is also very helpful for us guys who suffer from OCD, because sorrow, guilt and disgrace are big parts of you know, attaching to the thoughts and the anxiety, and it keeping it locked on even more. So that's really helpful for us. There is a chapter on obsession as well, which is very useful, and then she talks through sleeplessness. And the next chapter is chapter 16 is titled That Dreaded Morning Feeling. And a lot of us, again, whether it's panic disorder, GAD or OCD, we all know, you know, that waking up in the morning with that feeling hanging over you. Personally, for me, when I was at my worst, the morning was really, really intense, and really intense for obsessions as well, for the thoughts coming in, not just the physical anxiety. Then talks through depression, so obviously coming from a side effect of the sensitized nervous system, loss of confidence, and then the next few chapters kind of talk through things like, say if, for example, you were having had, as she would refer to, a nervous breakdown, or as we might refer to our kind of rock bottom period, if you've been impatient with it, for example. So she then has some advice for people returning home following a nervous breakdown, or being, you know, suffering badly and having to go into hospital for nervous illness. And then she talks through 3 good friends, occupation, courage and religion, which, and this is towards the end of the book. So what she's saying here is that the occupation, you know, as they say, and, you know, an idle mind is never necessarily good. So keeping busy. Courage, I think, you know, that's getting through each day, pushing through. And then religion, again, is kind of obviously bearing in mind that this was written over half a decade ago. Obviously, you know, some of us on this channel and in the OCD community are religious, and that's great if you have that to kind of help you and give you that extra strength. Personally, it's not relevant to me. I'm not religious, as much as I respect it. So that's not necessarily relevant for me. It's more kind of, you know, that feeling of sort of hope and general faith. So yeah, it's quite sort of extensive, covering the different aspects that come, you know, when you're very, very unwell with anxiety. You know, talking through like when your nerves are so that sensitized, and the various ways it can affect your life and your relationship with others. So it's a really helpful one to read when you are in the early stages of your recovery from an educational perspective. So the first half of the book that talks about the symptoms of the heightened, highly sensitized nervous system, also talks through sort of approaches to starting to recover from those feelings. And the principle that she's laid out here, it might sound quite familiar to you, but in other ways, in other books, it's four parts of this principle that Claire uses. It's facing, accepting, floating, and letting time pass. So if you think about it, that's kind of the basis for a lot of, you know, the things you might have read. If you've read Brain Lock, there's the sort of, I forget what the three, but the relabeling, sorry, I can't remember. But, you know, it's noticing what's happening there, reframing it, you know, what is it, which will help you to accept it. And she refers to floating. That's almost like as a very mindfulness approach of almost kind of floating above and feeling it, but not getting lost in all of the feelings. So it is very much, you know, when you hear the meditations and they say, watch your thoughts go on a stream, and, you know, don't dip your feet in the water, just watch the thoughts go through on the water. That principle. And letting time pass, which is a hugely important part of OCD recovery. You know, once we've educated ourselves, we're working on our rational beliefs. A big part of it, you know, we can't rush our recovery. It takes time for our beliefs to change and for us to practice accepting the feelings that we're having in our bodies, the emotions that we're having and the thoughts that we're having. And so all you can do then is let time pass, and that is bringing it along for the ride and living your life. So, you know, these principles are really helpful, you know, the facing, so turning around, looking it in the eye, this is what it is. We're not avoiding, we're not running away from it. Accepting, this is what it is. It's a symptom of your, you know, anxiety. You know, let it be. Don't interfere with it. Floating, again, it's sort of you're continuing to watch it, you know what it is. And then finally the letting time pass, so you're acknowledging it, you're feeling it, but you're still doing what you need to do and living your life. So I just want to highlight how Claire begins the book. So just to bear in mind, when you listen to Claire on YouTube, she'll talk about she might talk about her own experiences with panic attacks. She does have a really great understanding from obviously the patients that she's seen, but also her own first-hand experience, which is it's so helpful when somebody's helping you through recovery from mental illness. She starts off the book by saying, if you're reading this book because you are having a nervous breakdown or because your nerves are in a bad way, you are the very person for whom it has been written, and I shall therefore talk directly to you as if you were sitting beside me. And she really does in the book. And there's certain points in your recovery where this you know, there's certain points where there's tough love is really great, and there's certain points where kindness can really, really help as well. And the informative way that she speaks is great, but it's done in a kind way. And there's another great quote here which I just think is so relevant for us. It's in the epilogue, and it's by somebody called W.R. Houston. I'm not quite sure who that is. I think I'll Google in a bit. But the quote is, many of those who suffer from nervousness are persons of fine sensibilities, of delicate regard for honour, endowed with a feeling of duty and obligation. Their nerves have tricked them, misled them. So it's basically saying that we've kind of been, those of us who have struggled with anxiety, our nerves have sort of tricked us at times into making it all feel a lot worse than it is. So that really kind of, it's a good way to start this book, because she then goes on to say, no, this is an anxiety symptom and this is how we can approach it. You can get back to you again. So yes, that's Claire Weekes' Self-Help for Your Nerves, one of the books on the reading list. I hope this video has been useful to you. If you haven't yet read the book, I do recommend it. I think you can find really cheap secondhand copies on eBay as well, and then even if you sold it on afterwards, it's a good one, and you know, it's still being used now. As long as you kind of can read it, you know, certain parts of the language, don't be put off by you know, reference to nervous breakdown and nervous illness. It's all just other words for anxiety symptoms. But thank you very much for watching this video, and take care. Bye.